The Great Hall of Zenith Prime stretched across several miles of polished crystal. 12 different alien species sat in their assigned sections, each group looking down at the central speaking platform with various expressions of boredom, anger, or cold calculation. The quarterly meeting of the Galactic Council had been going on for 3 standard days, and most representatives were already thinking about returning to their homeworlds. Ambassador Vexithul of the Cathari Dominion stood at the platform's center. His reptilian form towered 8 feet tall, covered in dark green scales that gleamed under the artificial lights. Sharp claws tapped against the metal podium as he waited for the hall to quiet down. The Cathari were known throughout the galaxy as the strongest military force, and when they spoke, others listened. Fellow council members, Vexthul began, his voice carrying easily across the vast space. Today we discuss a matter that has come to our attention. A small planet in the outer rim has been sending communication signals into space. They call themselves humans, and they want to join our trade federation. Several council members laughed openly. The Zephyrian cloud dancers, beings of pure gas held together by electromagnetic fields, created small windstorms that served as their version of chuckling. The crystalline hive mind of Rigel made harsh, clicking sounds that echoed through their shared consciousness. Vexthul activated a holographic projector. Images filled the air above the platform, showing a blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. "This is Earth," he announced. "Watch their recent history and judge for yourselves." The hologram shifted to show scenes of human warfare. Soldiers with primitive gunpowder weapons fought in muddy trenches. Flying machines that barely stayed in the air dropped crude explosive devices on cities below. Ships made of metal and wood sailed across oceans, firing cannons at each other. "Look at their technology," Vexthul said with obvious disgust. "They burn fossil fuels to power their machines. They use chemical explosives as weapons. Their fastest ships can barely escape their own planet's gravity well." More images appeared. Humans in bulky white suits bounced around on their moon, planting a colorful flag and taking pictures. Their space station looked like a collection of metal tubes held together with wire and hope. Their most advanced spacecraft moved slower than a Cathari cargo hauler. The ethereal minds of Proxima began to glow brighter, a sign they were using their advanced telepathic abilities to analyze the data. These beings existed as pure energy, contained within floating crystal shells that served as their bodies. They considered themselves the most intelligent species in the galaxy. "We have examined their brain patterns," spoke the lead ethereal mind, its voice coming from everywhere at once. "Their neural networks are primitive. They think in linear patterns, unable to process multiple dimensions of thought simultaneously. Their consciousness is limited to a single timeline of existence." The mechanical collective from the Andromeda sector whirred and clicked as they processed the information through their shared computer minds. "Biological inefficiency detected," they announced in their emotionless mechanical voice. "Carbon-based life forms with limited processing power. Recommendation: classify as pre-technological species." Dr. Elena Vasquez stood alone in the small human section of the gallery. She was the only representative Earth had managed to send to the Council, and she looked tiny, surrounded by beings who stood twice her height or existed as living clouds of gas. Her simple blue suit seemed almost laughable compared to the advanced environmental suits and energy fields that protected the other ambassadors. Elena had spent 2 years traveling to reach this place, using humanity's most advanced spacecraft. The journey that took her 24 months would take any council member's ship less than a week. She knew how primitive Earth looked to these beings, but she had hoped they might see potential in humanity rather than just weakness. "Ambassador Vasquez of Earth requests permission to speak," Elena said, her voice barely carrying to the platform even with the translation devices. The hall fell silent for a moment, then erupted in what could only be described as amused chittering from a dozen different species. The Cathari ambassador waved one clawed hand dismissively. "Very well," Vexthul said. "Let the humans speak. It will be entertaining." Elena walked to the speaking platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. She looked up at the thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and consciousness fields focused on her. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. Honored council members, I come before you today to request that Earth be granted membership in the Galactic Trade Federation. We know we appear primitive compared to your civilizations, but we have much to offer. The Zephyrian cloud dancers created small tornadoes that served as their laughter. What could you possibly offer us, one of them asked, its voice like wind through metal pipes. We can manipulate matter at the atomic level. We build cities in the hearts of stars. What do you have that we need? Elena straightened her shoulders. We have creativity. We have determination. We solve problems in ways others don't think of. Give us a chance to prove ourselves. The crystalline hive mind clicked and buzzed among themselves for several seconds before responding. Your species fights constantly among yourselves. You destroy your own environment for short-term gains. You have no unified government. How can we trust beings who cannot even work together on their own planet? That's true, Elena admitted. We do fight. We do make mistakes. But we also learn from them. We're getting better. We've started working together more in recent decades. The ethereal minds pulsed with what seemed like irritation. Your neural patterns show chaotic thought processes. You rely on emotion rather than logic. Your decision-making is flawed and unpredictable. This makes you unsuitable for galactic commerce. Vexithul stepped forward again, his massive form casting a shadow over Elena. The evidence is clear. Humans are barely above the level of animals. They have no advanced technology, no unified society, and no useful skills that we lack. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed Earth's pollution, wars, and social problems. Look at them. They cannot even keep their own planet clean. They waste resources fighting each other instead of exploring space. They are exactly the kind of primitive species we established the protection protocols to handle. The mechanical collective's spokesman, a 12-foot-tall robot covered in sensors and weapons, stepped forward. Motion to classify Earth as Protected Species Category D. Recommendation: no contact for minimum of 500 standard years. Allow natural evolution to proceed without interference. The vote was swift and unanimous. Every species except Elena voted to declare Earth a protected world, too primitive for contact and too weak to matter. The holographic display showed the official classification being entered into galactic law. Elena stood at the platform as the council members began to file out. Their business with humanity concluded in less than an hour. She watched beings who could travel faster than light, manipulate matter with their thoughts, and live for thousands of years dismiss her entire species as unworthy of notice. As the hall emptied, Elena activated her personal communication device to send a message back to Earth. The transmission would take months to reach home, traveling through the primitive relay stations humanity had managed to build. Mission failed, she said quietly into the device. They've classified us as a protected species. No contact allowed for 500 years. They think we're too primitive to be worth their time. She paused, looking around the empty hall where representatives of advanced civilizations had just laughed at humanity's achievements. A small smile crossed her face. You should know something, she continued into the communicator. They think our biggest accomplishment is walking on our own moon. They have no idea what we're really capable of. They don't know us at all. The transmission ended and Elena began the long journey home. Behind her, the crystal halls of Zenith Prime gleamed in artificial starlight, home to beings who considered themselves the masters of the galaxy. None of them suspected that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 6 months after the humiliating rejection at Zenith Prime, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in an elevator that descended deeper into the Earth than most people knew was possible. The Swiss Alps rose thousands of feet above her head, but she was traveling, in the opposite direction, down into tunnels that had been carved by machines no government officially acknowledged. The elevator finally stopped with a soft chime. When the doors opened, Elena stepped into a world that would have amazed the alien council members who had dismissed humanity as primitive. The underground facility stretched for miles in every direction, its walls lined with technology that seemed to bend light around itself. General Marcus Chen waited for her in the main briefing room. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, wearing a uniform that bore no national flags or identifying marks. Behind him stood Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead physicist for something called Project Lazarus. "Welcome home, Ambassador," General Chen said as Elena entered the room. "I trust your journey back was more comfortable than your trip out." Elena nodded, taking a seat at the large table. "The new ship you sent cut my travel time by 90%. I'm guessing that's not something we're sharing with the rest of humanity yet?" Dr. Kim smiled, her young face contrasting with the advanced equations floating in holographic displays around her. "That ship is still considered primitive by our current standards. You should see what we've built since you left." General Chen activated a wall-sized screen that showed the footage Elena had recorded at the Galactic Council. They watched in silence as alien representatives laughed at human achievements, dismissed Earth's technology, and voted to classify humanity as a protected species. "Amusing," Dr. Kim said when the footage ended. "They think our moon landing was our greatest achievement. They have no idea we've been traveling to other star systems for 30 years. Elena leaned forward in her chair. 30 years? But the official records show we've never traveled beyond Mars. The official records show what we want them to show, General Chen replied. Elena, what I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that don't officially exist. Everything you think you know about human space exploration is a carefully constructed lie. The room's lights dimmed, and new holographic displays filled the air. Elena gasped as she saw images of spacecraft that looked nothing like the primitive rockets the public knew about. These ships were sleek, impossible things that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions at once. In 1973, Dr. Kim began. A deep-sea exploration mission in the Mariana Trench discovered something that changed everything. A spacecraft crashed on the ocean floor. Not human, not like anything we'd ever seen. The hologram showed the wreckage of a vessel that hurt to look at directly. Its surfaces seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, but maintained perfect, geometric patterns that human eyes couldn't quite follow. The ship belonged to a race we call the Architects, Dr. Kim continued. Based on what we've learned, they existed millions of years ago, long before any of the current galactic civilizations. They transcended physical existence, but they left their technology behind. Elena stared at the images. You reverse-engineered alien technology? For 50 years? We didn't just reverse-engineer it, General Chen said. We improved it. The Architects built their technology to work with beings who existed partially outside normal space and time. Humans, it turns out, have some very unusual properties that make us uniquely suited to use their devices. New images appeared, showing underground laboratories where scientists worked with materials that seemed to ignore the laws of physics, metals that existed in several dimensions at once, energy sources that generated power by accessing parallel universes, computers that calculated using quantum consciousness. We've been very careful, Dr. Kim explained. We maintained the illusion that humanity was still primitive while we developed technology that makes the Galactic Council's most advanced civilizations look like children playing with sticks. The holographic display shifted to show a massive construction project. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she saw what looked like a small moon being built in space, hidden behind Earth's actual moon, where orbital telescopes couldn't detect it. The UES Prometheus, General Chen announced. Our first reality-class starship. It exists in 14 dimensions simultaneously and can phase in and out of normal space-time at will. Its power source is a controlled micro-universe that generates energy equivalent to a star. Elena watched as the impossible ship seemed to flicker between existing and not existing. How long have you been building this? The Prometheus has been under construction for 15 years, Dr. Kim said, but we finished it 3 months ago. We've been waiting for the right moment to reveal humanity's true capabilities. The Galactic Council's rejection provided that moment, General Chen added. We needed to see how advanced civilizations would treat a species they perceived as weak. Now we know. The hologram showed more ships under construction, each one larger and more impossible than the last. Elena counted at least a dozen vessels that defied everything she thought she knew about physics. We've been busy while you were gone, Dr. Kim said with obvious pride. We've made contact with 17 species that the Galactic Council has been oppressing. Turns out, When you can offer technology that makes their oppressors look helpless, a lot of civilizations are willing to listen. Elena felt her worldview reshaping itself around this new information. So, when I was standing there being laughed at by beings who think they're superior to us, you were representing a civilization that could have destroyed their entire galactic federation without breaking a sweat, General Chen finished. We let them think we were weak because it served our purposes. We wanted to learn about them, understand their technology, their politics, their weaknesses. And now? Elena asked. Dr. Kim's smile turned predatory. Now we introduce ourselves properly. The holographic display changed to show a star map of the local galaxy. Hundreds of red dots marked the locations of oppressed species, slave worlds, and civilizations that had been destroyed by the Galactic Council's more aggressive members. The Kethuri have wiped out 14 species in the last century, General Chen said, pointing to various red dots. The ethereal minds use their telepathic abilities to control and manipulate weaker civilizations. The mechanical collective strips mine inhabited worlds without regard for the native life. The Galactic Council isn't a peaceful federation, Dr. Kim added. It's a protection racket run by the strongest civilizations. They maintain order by crushing anyone who might threaten their dominance. Elena studied the map, seeing the scope of suffering that existed while Earth had been developing. In isolation, what are we going to do about it? We're going to give them a choice, General Chen said. Reform or face the consequences. The galaxy has been ruled by bullies for too long. The door to the briefing room opened, and Captain Rebecca Torres entered. She wore a uniform Elena didn't recognize, made of material that seemed to absorb light. The woman moved with the confidence of someone who commanded forces beyond imagination. Ambassador Vasquez, Captain Torres said with a slight nod. I hope you're ready for a return trip to Zenith Prime. The Prometheus is prepared for her maiden voyage. Elena looked around the room at the faces of people who had been planning this moment for decades. When do we leave? Immediately, Dr. Kim said. The Galactic Council is holding an emergency session tomorrow. Something about unusual energy readings from the outer rim. They're about to get a very big surprise. General Chen stood up, his expression serious. Elena, I want you to understand what we're about to do. When the Prometheus appears at Zenith Prime, everything changes. There's no going back to the way things were. Elena thought about the aliens who had laughed at humanity, who had dismissed her species as barely worthy of protection. She remembered the condescending way they had spoken about human intelligence, human technology, human potential. Good, she said firmly. It's time they learned who they're really dealing with. Captain Torres smiled, and Elena saw something in her eyes that would have terrified the Galactic Council if they had been there to see it. It was the look of someone who held overwhelming power and was finally ready to use it. Welcome to the real space program, Ambassador, Torres said. Let's go show the galaxy what humans can really do. As they left the briefing room, Elena caught one last glimpse of the construction bays where impossible ships were being built by a species the galaxy considered primitive. She thought about the Kethuri ambassador, who had dismissed humanity as barely above animals. He was about to learn how wrong he had been. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called after every deep space monitoring station in 3 sectors detected the same impossible readings. Admiral Zektar of the Kethuri fleet stood before the assembled representatives, his usual confidence replaced by obvious confusion. The energy signature defies all known physics, he reported, his clawed hands gesturing at the holographic displays floating above the platform. Our sensors indicate something massive approaching the galactic core, but the readings make no sense. The ethereal minds pulsed with agitated light as they processed the data. The object appears to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, their spokesman announced. This should not be possible with current technology. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in the human section, no longer alone. Captain Rebecca Torres had joined her, though the aliens didn't yet know who she was. Elena watched, the panic building among council members with quiet satisfaction. Could it be an ancient artifact? Asked the crystalline hive mind representative. Something from the first civilization that has somehow reactivated? Admiral Zektar's expression grew darker. That was our first thought. I have deployed the Fourth Fleet to intercept whatever this thing is. 10,000 warships should be enough to handle any artifact, no matter how advanced. The holographic display showed the massive Cathari fleet moving through space toward the energy signature. Their ships were impressive by galactic standards, each one capable of reducing a planet to dust. The combined firepower of the fleet could sterilize entire star systems. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication array. "We're approaching the target coordinates. Visual contact in 30 seconds. The council chamber fell silent as they waited for the fleet's report. Even the normally chattering Zephyrian cloud dancers stopped their constant wind patterns to listen. "Admiral," the voice returned, now sounding confused and frightened. "We're getting readings that don't make sense. The object appears to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time." On the holographic display, space itself began to ripple around a point of absolute darkness. Reality seemed to bend and twist, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ethereal minds recoiled in their crystal shells, their energy forms dimming with what could only be described as terror. Then it appeared. The UES Prometheus materialized like a nightmare made real. The ship was impossibly large, yet somehow gave the impression of being small enough to hold in one's hand. Its surface flowed like liquid mercury, while maintaining perfect geometric patterns that existed in more dimensions than the observers could perceive. The vessel phased in and out of reality, sometimes appearing solid, sometimes translucent, sometimes seeming to exist in several places at once. Waves of distorted space-time rippled outward from its hull, causing the surrounding Cathari ships to register impossible readings on their instruments. Admiral Zektar stared at the display in shock. "What in the name of the ancestors is that thing?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Elena Vasquez stood up in the human section and activated her communication device. Her image appeared not as a hologram on the main platform, but as if she were standing directly in the chamber despite being in her assigned seat. The ethereal mind screamed in psychic agony as they realized the human was broadcasting through dimensional layers they couldn't even detect, let alone understand. "This is Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth," she announced calmly. "The vessel you're looking at is the UES Prometheus, commanded by Captain Rebecca Torres of the United Earth Defense Force." Captain Torres stood beside Elena, and her image also appeared in the chamber with impossible clarity. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Greetings, Galactic Council," Torres said with a slight smile. "We received your classification of our species as primitive and protected. We thought it was time for a proper introduction." The council chamber erupted in confused chatter from a dozen different species. The mechanical collective's sensors were spinning wildly as they tried to process data that violated their understanding of physics. "Impossible," announced the lead ethereal mind, its crystal shell flickering with distressed energy patterns. "Humans are barely sentient. We analyzed their neural patterns. They cannot possess technology of this level." Captain Torres's smile grew wider. "You analyzed what we wanted you to analyze. Did you really think a species capable of reaching your council chambers would show you our real capabilities on the first meeting?" Admiral Zektar's voice crackled through the communication array from his flagship. "This must be some kind of trick. Humans don't have the knowledge to build ships like this." "You're right," Elena said. "We didn't build this technology from scratch, we found it." The holographic display in the council chamber changed, showing images of the derelict ship in Earth's ocean depths. The assembled aliens gasped as they recognized architectural patterns that predated their own civilizations by millions of years. "The architects," whispered the crystalline hive mind representative. "You found architect technology?" Dr. Sarah Kim's voice joined the transmission from Earth, her image appearing alongside Elena and Torres. "We didn't just find it. We improved it. Turns out, human neural patterns are uniquely compatible with architect systems. We can interface with their technology in ways no other known species can." The council members stared in growing horror as their most advanced sensors failed to get accurate readings on the human vessel. Every instrument reading contradicted the others, Mass readings showed negative values. Energy output registered as both zero and infinite. Temporal scanners suggested the ship was somehow arriving before it had left Earth. Your sensors are functioning correctly, Dr. Kim explained, seeming to read their thoughts. The Prometheus exists in 14 dimensions, simultaneously. It can phase between different layers of reality at will. What you're seeing is a three-dimensional shadow of something much larger and more complex. The Zephyrian cloud dancers began creating frantic wind patterns, their version of panic. This is impossible. No species in the galaxy possesses such technology. No species that you know about, Captain Torres corrected. You've been so busy congratulating yourselves on your superiority that you never bothered to truly investigate the species you dismissed. Classic mistake. Admiral Zektar's voice came through the speakers again, now tinged with anger and fear. I don't care what kind of trick this is. No single ship can stand against the Fourth Fleet. All vessels prepare to fire. Elena's expression didn't change. Admiral, I strongly advise against that course of action. Why? Zektar snarled. Because your ship looks strange? Parlor tricks won't save you from 10,000 warships. Captain Torres shrugged. Go ahead. We're curious to see how your weapons perform against reality-class shielding. The holographic display showed the Cathari fleet taking firing positions around the Prometheus. Energy readings spiked as 10,000 ships charged their most powerful weapons. Antimatter torpedoes, plasma cannons, dark energy disruptors, and quantum warheads all aimed at the impossible human vessel. Fire, Admiral Zektar commanded. The void around the Prometheus exploded with enough destructive energy to crack planets. Weapons that could sterilize star systems unleashed their fury in a coordinated barrage that lit up space like a newborn star. The energy storm raged for several minutes, the combined firepower of an entire fleet focused on a single target. When the light finally faded, the sensors showed empty space where the human ship had been. Target destroyed, Admiral Zektar announced with satisfaction. Whatever that thing was, it's gone now. Captain Torres's voice came through the communication array, tinged with what might have been amusement. Are you finished? The Prometheus shimmered back into existence exactly where it had been before the attack. Not a single mark marred its flowing surface. The ship appeared completely unaffected by the most powerful weapons in the galactic arsenal. How? Gasped the Mechanical Collective spokesman. Dr. Kim's image smiled. The ship simply phased out of your dimensional layer during the attack. Your weapons can only affect 3 dimensions of space-time. We exist in 11 more that you can't even perceive. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every representative stared at the display showing the undamaged human vessel surrounded by confused and frightened alien warships. Elena Vasquez stood up, her image still, impossibly present in the chamber despite her physical location. Council members, I believe we need to have a serious discussion about humanity's place in galactic civilization. The beings who had dismissed humans as primitive barely 6 months ago now found themselves staring at technology that made their greatest achievements look like children's toys. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted dramatically, and they were no longer the ones holding it. Captain Torres's voice carried a subtle warning as she addressed the stunned assembly. We'll be docking at Zenith Prime in 6 hours. I suggest you use that time to reconsider your previous assessment of human capabilities. The transmission ended, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate a universe where the species they had laughed at now possessed the power to reshape reality itself. Admiral Zektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the impossible ship that had just shrugged off the combined firepower of his entire fleet. His scaled hands gripped the command console so tightly that his claws left marks in the metal. This cannot be real, he growled to his bridge crew. Some kind of illusion. Advanced holographic technology designed to make us think their ship survived. The sensor operator, a younger Cathari with darker scales, looked up from his instruments. Admiral, our readings show the vessel is completely intact, not even minor damage to their hull. Impossible, Zektar roared. No ship can survive that level of firepower. We used enough energy to destroy a small moon. From the Prometheus, Captain Torres's voice came through the communication system, with what sounded suspiciously like patience. "Admiral, would you like us to demonstrate what our ship can actually do? You seem to be having trouble accepting reality." "Your ship got lucky," Zektar replied, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Whatever trick you used won't work twice. All ships, reload, and prepare for a second attack." Dr. Sarah Kim's voice joined the transmission from Earth. "Admiral, before you waste more ammunition, let me explain something. What you just witnessed wasn't our ship defending itself. It was our ship ignoring you completely." The holographic displays throughout the Cathari fleet showed the Prometheus beginning to change. The ship's flowing surface rippled like water, and suddenly, there were two identical vessels floating in space. "Scanning shows both ships as equally real," reported a Cathari sensor technician, his voice cracking with stress. The two ships became 4, then 8, then 17 perfect copies of the Prometheus spread across the void, each one registering as a solid physical object on every sensor array in the fleet. "Which one is real?" whispered a bridge officer. Captain Torres answered as if she had heard him. "They're all real. The Prometheus exists in multiple dimensional states. What you're seeing are cross-sections of the same vessel manifesting in your three-dimensional space." Admiral Zektar felt his confidence crumbling, but refused to show weakness in front of his crew. "Parlor tricks. All ships, target the nearest vessel and fire." The Cathari fleet opened fire again, this time splitting their attention between multiple targets. Energy beams and missiles streaked toward the 17 ships only to pass harmlessly through them, as each vessel phased out of normal space-time just long enough for the weapons to miss. "Still ignoring you," Torres said cheerfully. Then the Prometheus began to demonstrate what human technology could really accomplish. Space around the Cathari fleet started to behave strangely. Admiral Zektar watched in growing horror as his ships began moving backward through their own actions. The weapons they had just fired reversed course, traveling back into their launching tubes. His crew repeated their movements in reverse, like a recording played backward. "What's happening?" Zektar demanded. "Localized time manipulation," Dr. Kim explained matter-of-factly. "We're creating temporal loops around your fleet. You're experiencing the last few minutes in reverse chronological order. We could keep you stuck in this loop forever if we wanted to." The temporal distortion ended, snapping the fleet back to normal time. Several Cathari crew members collapsed from the disorientation of experiencing time flowing backward. "That was just a small demonstration," Elena Vasquez said, her voice carrying across all communication channels. "Would you like to see what our ship can do when it actually tries?" Before Admiral Zektar could respond, the Prometheus moved. It didn't accelerate or travel through space in any conventional sense. One moment it was distant, the next it was directly in front of his flagship, close enough that its hull filled the entire view screen. "Collision alert!" screamed the navigation officer, but there was no collision. The human ship existed in the same space as the Cathari flagship without touching it, phasing through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Zektar could see human crew members moving about inside their vessel, separated from his bridge by layers of reality he couldn't comprehend. "We're occupying the same coordinates in different dimensional phases," Captain Torres explained. "Your ship is fine, but I thought you might like a closer look at human engineering." The Admiral stared through his view screen at technology that defied everything he thought he knew about physics. The human ship's interior seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions, with corridors that folded in on themselves and rooms that existed in impossible geometric configurations. "Now," Torres continued, "let me show you something more impressive." The Prometheus moved away from the flagship and approached a cluster of asteroids floating nearby. The ship extended what looked like tendrils of pure energy that touched each rock. Instantly, the asteroids began to change. Zektar watched in stunned silence as random chunks of stone and metal transformed into perfect geometric shapes. Spheres, cubes, dodecahedrons, and forms that had no names in any known language appeared where crude rocks had been moments before. "Matter manipulation at the subatomic level," Dr. Kim said. "We're rearranging the atomic structure of those asteroids in real time." The process requires complete understanding of quantum mechanics across multiple dimensional layers. But the Prometheus wasn't finished. The geometric shapes began to glow with internal light, and Zektar realized with shock that each one had become a miniature star. The human ship had just converted random asteroids into stable fusion reactors. Each of those little suns will burn for approximately 10,000 years, Torres said casually. We thought they might serve as navigation markers for future travelers. The ethereal minds, watching from their chambers on Zenith Prime, sent out psychic screams that reached across space. They had attempted to probe the human ship with their vast consciousness, only to encounter something that made their combined intellect seem like an insect trying to understand a hurricane. What did you find? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. The ship contains an artificial intelligence, the lead ethereal mind managed to say. Its crystal shell flickering with distress, but it exists across multiple realities simultaneously. Its consciousness is spread through dimensions we cannot perceive. Trying to understand it is like trying to hold an ocean in a teacup. Dr. Kim nodded. The Prometheus is guided by an AI we call Athena. She's built using architect technology and human neural patterns. Her processing power exceeds the combined intelligence of every species in your council by several orders of magnitude. To demonstrate, the ship created something that made the watching aliens question their understanding of reality itself. A bubble of space appeared beside the Prometheus, containing what looked like a miniature galaxy. Stars, planets, and cosmic phenomena all existed within a sphere no larger than a shuttlecraft. A pocket universe, Dr. Kim explained. We created it using controlled manipulation of space-time. It contains approximately 50 billion stars and twice as many planets. Some of those worlds already support life that we designed from scratch. Admiral Zektar's legs gave out, and he collapsed into his command chair. His crew stared at the displays in shocked silence as they watched humans casually create and manipulate entire universes. This is impossible, the Mechanical Collective announced, though their normally confident electronic voices now carried obvious uncertainty. No species possesses this level of technological advancement. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of galactic core. You're thinking in three-dimensional terms, Captain Torres replied. When you can access power from multiple dimensional layers simultaneously, energy becomes effectively unlimited. The pocket universe folded itself into a small sphere that began orbiting the Prometheus like a jeweled ornament. Several more appeared, each containing different cosmic phenomena. Nebulae, black holes, quasars, and stranger things that had no names in galactic standard language. Each of those universes is completely real, Elena said, addressing the stunned Galactic Council. They contain trillions of life forms that we created and protect. In a very real sense, humanity has become a universe-creating species. The final demonstration was the most terrifying of all. The Prometheus projected a holographic display that showed Earth, but not as the aliens remembered it. The planet was surrounded by a network of structures that existed partially outside normal space-time. Orbital platforms phased in and out of reality around Earth's moon. Defensive installations that looked more like geometric art than weapons covered the planet's surface. Ships identical to the Prometheus patrolled the solar system, their hulls rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is Earth's current state, Dr. Kim announced. What you saw during Ambassador Vasquez's first visit was carefully maintained theater. We've been building a civilization that exists in multiple dimensions for the past 50 years. The display zoomed in to show human cities that defied architectural physics. Buildings that existed in folded space, allowing millions of people to live in areas the size of city blocks. Transportation networks that moved through dimensional tunnels, connecting distant parts of the planet instantaneously. Our population centers exist primarily in pocket dimensions, Torres explained. What you see on Earth's surface is mostly nature preserves and defensive installations. Our actual civilization is hidden in spaces your sensors cannot detect. Admiral Zektar stared at the display showing Earth's true nature, then looked at his fleet of ships that had been rendered obsolete in the space of an hour. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What do you want from us? Elena's image appeared on every screen in the Cathari fleet, her expression serious but not hostile. We want to talk, Admiral. But first, you need to understand that the conversation has completely changed. The Prometheus began moving toward Zenith Prime, reality bending around it as it traveled. The most powerful fleet in galactic history followed behind it like an escort guard, their weapons useless against technology that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. Tell the Galactic Council we'll be arriving shortly, Captain Torres said. And Admiral, I suggest you prepare them for some very uncomfortable truths about how the galaxy really works. Each of those universes is completely real, Elena said, addressing the stunned Galactic Council. They contain trillions of life forms that we created and protect. In a very real sense, humanity has become a universe-creating species. The final demonstration was the most terrifying of all. The Prometheus projected a holographic display that showed Earth, but not as the aliens remembered it. The planet was surrounded by a network of structures that existed partially outside normal space-time. Orbital platforms phased in and out of reality around Earth's moon. Defensive installations that looked more like geometric art than weapons covered the planet's surface. Ships identical to the Prometheus patrolled the solar system, their hulls rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is Earth's current state, Dr. Kim announced. What you saw during Ambassador Vasquez's first visit was carefully maintained theater. We've been building a civilization that exists in multiple dimensions for the past 50 years. The display zoomed in to show human cities that defied architectural physics. Buildings that existed in folded space, allowing millions of people to live in areas the size of city blocks. Transportation networks that moved through dimensional tunnels, connecting distant parts of the planet instantaneously. Our population centers exist primarily in pocket dimensions, Torres explained. What you see on Earth's surface is mostly nature preserves and defensive installations. Our actual civilization is hidden in spaces your sensors cannot detect. Admiral Zektar stared at the display showing Earth's true nature, then looked at his fleet of ships that had been rendered obsolete in the space of an hour. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What do you want from us? Elena's image appeared on every screen in the Cathari fleet, her expression serious but not hostile. We want to talk, Admiral. But first, you need to understand that the conversation has completely changed. The Prometheus began moving toward Zenith Prime, reality bending around it as it traveled. The most powerful fleet in galactic history followed behind it like an escort guard, their weapons useless against technology that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. Tell the Galactic Council we'll be arriving shortly, Captain Torres said. And Admiral, I suggest you prepare them for some very uncomfortable truths about how the galaxy really works. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from 12 advanced civilizations sat in stunned silence as the UES Prometheus docked with Zenith Prime. The massive human ship didn't use conventional docking procedures. Instead, it simply phased part of itself through the station's hull, creating an airlock that existed in the same space as the station's wall, without damaging anything. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked through the impossible airlock, no longer the lone human representative who had been dismissed and laughed at 6 months earlier. She wore the same simple blue suit, but now it seemed like a deliberate choice rather than a sign of primitive manufacturing. Behind her walked Captain Rebecca Torres and Dr. Sarah Kim, their presence filling the chamber with an energy that made the alien representatives deeply uncomfortable. But it was Elena who commanded attention as she walked to the central platform. This time no one laughed. No one made dismissive comments about human intelligence or primitive technology. The beings who had voted to classify Earth as a protected species now watched her with the careful attention reserved for apex predators. Honored council members, Elena began, her voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. I believe we need to have a serious discussion about the current state of galactic civilization. She activated a holographic projector, but instead of showing human achievements, the display revealed something that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Star maps appeared, showing the territories controlled by each major civilization. Red zones marked planets that had been strip-mined until they were lifeless. Orange areas indicated slave worlds where entire species lived in bondage. Black dots showed the locations where civilizations had been completely destroyed. The Cathari Dominion, Elena said, pointing to large sections of red and black, has wiped out 14 species in the last century, not defeated in war, completely exterminated. Every man, woman, and child killed, their planets turned into mining operations. Admiral Zektar, who had arrived just before Elena, said nothing. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by the hollow look of someone whose worldview had been completely shattered. Elena turned to another section of the display. The ethereal minds use their telepathic abilities to control and manipulate weaker civilizations. Entire species live as mental slaves, believing they are free while having every thought monitored and controlled. The crystal shells of the ethereal minds dimmed noticeably, but they didn't deny the accusation. The mechanical collective strips. Valuable resources from inhabited worlds without regard for native life, Elena continued. They classify living beings as biological contamination and remove them the same way they would clear rocks from a mining site. The robotic representative of the mechanical collective spoke in its emotionless voice. Efficiency requires removal of obstacles to resource extraction. Biological entities are inherently inefficient. Dr. Kim stepped forward, her young face showing none of the deference she had shown in earlier transmissions. That attitude is exactly what we're here to address. The galaxy has been ruled by bullies for too long. Elena activated another section of the holographic display. This time it showed dozens of species that most council members had never heard of. Small civilizations that existed in the spaces between the major powers, constantly living in fear of being conquered or destroyed. While you've been congratulating yourselves on your superiority, Elena said, we've been making contact with the species you ignore or oppress. Turns out when you offer protection from bullies and access to technology that makes their oppressors helpless, a lot of civilizations are willing to listen. The display changed to show human ships appearing in systems throughout the galaxy. Not just vessels like the Prometheus, but entire fleets of reality-class starships protecting worlds that had been defenseless days before. Over the past 6 months, Captain Torres said, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber, we've established defense agreements with 47 species. They're no longer afraid of you. The crystalline hive mind clicked and buzzed among themselves before their spokesman spoke. What gives you the right to interfere with galactic politics? You are one species among thousands. Elena's expression hardened. The same right you claimed when you decided to classify civilizations as primitive or advanced. The same right the Cathari claimed when they destroyed 14 species. The same right the ethereal minds claimed when they enslaved entire worlds. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. The difference is that we're strong enough to back up our decisions. Dr. Kim activated her own holographic display, showing technical specifications that made the assembled scientists and engineers among the alien representatives gasp in shock. Energy outputs that exceeded stellar cores, weapons that could erase matter from existence across multiple dimensions, defensive systems that made the ship effectively invulnerable to any known form of attack. The Prometheus is our first-generation reality-class starship, Dr. Kim explained. We've already begun construction on second- and third-generation vessels that make the Prometheus look primitive by comparison. How many ships do you have? Asked the Zephyrian Cloud Dancer representative, his gaseous form swirling with nervous energy. Captain Torres smiled, and the expression held no warmth. How many do we need? Elena stepped back to the center of the platform. That brings us to why we're really here. The galaxy is going to change, whether you want it to or not. The only question is whether that change happens peacefully or through force. She activated the final section of her presentation, showing a new star map. The territories controlled by the major civilizations were still there, but now they were surrounded by green zones marked as protected systems under human authority. Every species that has requested our protection now has it, Elena announced. The Cathari will not be destroying any more civilizations. The ethereal minds will not be enslaving any more worlds. The mechanical collective will not be strip mining any more inhabited planets. You cannot simply declare galactic law, snarled the Cathari representative who had taken Admiral Zektar's place at the council table. Elena turned to face him directly. We're not declaring law. We're stating reality. If you attempt to harm any species under our protection, we will stop you. If you try to continue your current practices, we will intervene. If you refuse to change, we will change you. And if we unite against you? Asked the mechanical collective spokesman. All major civilizations working together? Dr. Kim laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both musical and terrifying. You're welcome to try. The combined military might of the entire galactic council wouldn't last 5 minutes against a single human ship. To demonstrate her point, she activated a recording from the recent encounter with the Cathari fleet. The council members watched their most powerful military force being completely humiliated by technology they couldn't understand or counter. But we're not here to conquer you, Elena said, her voice becoming more diplomatic. We're here to offer you a choice. Reform your civilizations, end the oppression, the slavery, the genocide. Join us in building a galaxy where species work together instead of preying on each other. And if we refuse? Asked the ethereal mind's representative. Elena's expression remained perfectly calm. Then you'll discover what happens when a species, with the power to create universes, decides that you're a threat to galactic peace. Captain Torres stepped forward, her presence somehow filling the entire chamber despite her human size. We've given you a taste of what our technology can do. But that was just the beginning. We have weapons that could erase your entire civilization from having ever existed. Temporal manipulation that could undo your species' evolution. Reality warping capabilities that could turn your homeworlds into empty space. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But we prefer cooperation to annihilation. Help us build something better, and you'll find humans to be generous allies. Oppose us, and you'll discover why the architects left warnings about species that transcend dimensional barriers. Elena activated one final holographic display, showing plans for a new kind of galactic civilization, trade networks that benefited everyone instead of just the powerful, scientific collaboration that shared knowledge across species barriers, exploration fleets that discovered new worlds without immediately exploiting them. This is what we're offering, she said. A galaxy where strength protects the weak instead of preying on them. Where intelligence is used to solve problems instead of creating new ways to dominate others. Where technology serves life instead of destroying it. You have 1 Earth year to decide, Captain Torres announced. End the oppression, free the slaves, stop the genocides, prove that your civilizations can change. And if we do? Asked the Zephyrian representative. Dr. Kim smiled, and this time the expression held genuine warmth. Then we'll share technology that will advance your civilizations by thousands of years overnight, energy sources that will power your worlds forever, medical knowledge that will eliminate disease and extend lifespans indefinitely, scientific understanding that will let you explore not just the galaxy, but other universes entirely. Elena looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had dismissed humanity as barely sentient. 6 months ago, you thought we were primitive animals playing with fire. Today, you've learned that we're the species with the power to reshape reality itself. She turned toward the impossible airlock that led back to the Prometheus. Use this year wisely. When we return, we'll expect to see a galaxy that's worthy of the technology we're prepared to share. As the human representatives walked back to their ship, Elena paused at the edge of the platform. Oh, and council members, we'll be watching. Every oppressed species, every slave world, every act of genocide. We see everything now. The Prometheus phased out of the station and disappeared, but not before broadcasting one final message to every communication array in the galaxy. Elena's voice reached trillions of beings across thousands of worlds, to every species that has lived in fear of the powerful, to every civilization that has been oppressed or enslaved, to everyone who has ever been told they were too weak to matter. Humanity has come to the galaxy. The age of bullies is over. The transmission ended, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate a universe where the species they had laughed at now held the power to determine their fate. Through the viewports of Zenith Prime, they could see other ships materializing throughout their space. Vessels of impossible design, carrying the formerly oppressed species who were no longer afraid to show themselves. The galaxy had a new protector, and it wore a human face. The question now was whether the old powers would adapt to this new reality, or find themselves swept aside by forces they could never have imagined. Elena Vasquez, who had once stood alone as humanity's only representative, was no longer alone. Behind her stood a species that had turned the galaxy upside down in less than a year, and the revolution was just beginning.